Which is better, the Bold N3 or the Bold N2? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, and in this video, we're going to be comparing these two devices from Bold. Now, for full disclosure, the company was kind enough to send both of these out to me to cover here on the channel. However, all opinions expressed in this video and the other ones that I've made about these devices are completely my own. And also, if you do want to see additional content about either of these two phones, I have already reviewed both of them here on the channel. Now, hence the names of these devices, the Bold N3 is the successor to the Bold N2, and the Bold N2 was launched last year, whereas the Bold N3 is a very recently launched phone. Now, as of right now, both of these devices are still being offered for sale. However, if you do decide to go for the Bold N2, you are going to be saving around $75 to $80. Now, pricing and availability will definitely change as time goes on, so definitely take a look at the various links in the video description to see what these two devices are currently being offered at. One thing's for sure though, both of these phones offer a ton of different features and abilities, especially considering that they are so affordable. And with both of these phones, they definitely feel a lot more expensive than they actually are. Now, the first thing I want to discuss here are the displays that we're getting here with these devices. Now, with the Bold N3, we're getting a slightly larger 6.78-inch display compared to the Bold N2, which gives us a 6.6-inch display. Now, when holding the two phones side by side here, you can see that without a doubt, the Bold N3 is the larger phone of the two, but both phones are pretty similar in size. Now, with both of these devices, we are getting AMOLED displays, which is excellent because we're getting very bright colors here, also really good viewing angles as well, and overall, AMOLED gives you a much better experience compared to LCD, for example. Both of the displays on these phones are 1080p. However, the biggest difference is that with the Bold N3, we're getting a faster 120Hz refresh rate compared to a 60Hz refresh rate with the Bold N2. Now, 60 Hz is pretty standard for most phones out there, so having 120 Hz is certainly a premium feature, but with that faster refresh rate, things do run a lot smoother here when navigating around the phone, and overall, it does make this phone feel more expensive than it actually is. Now, that being said, I do think you can still get by perfectly fine with a 60 Hz refresh rate display. Now, beyond that, with the Bold N3, we are getting a slightly lower PPI at 388, compared to 393 with the Bold N2, but that's pretty much due to the display being a little bit bigger here. And then with the Bold N3, we're getting a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a more narrow but taller form factor, and we're getting a 19.5:9 aspect ratio with the Bold N2. So pretty similar, but a bit more narrow here with the Bold N3. Now, taking a look at the front-facing cameras on both phones, there's some pretty big differences here and also some similarities. Now, the first thing you probably noticed is that with the Bold N3, we have a smaller camera cutout for the front-facing camera compared to the Bold N2, whereas it's kind of a pill shape here, situated on the upper left corner. Now, with the Bold N2, we are getting a dual camera setup with a 16 megapixel main camera and 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and it is pretty unusual to even find a dual front-facing camera on really any smartphone. But from my experience of using this phone, that additional front-facing camera really doesn't serve much of a purpose at all. Whereas with the Bold N3, we're just getting one camera here, and it is 16 megapixels. Now, internally with both phones, we are getting 256 gigabytes of storage along with microSD card expansion. So having that much internal storage is very generous. That's a lot, and I think most people out there don't have phones with that much internal space. But in addition to that, it is nice that they still give us the option to add in a microSD card to offload photos and videos, for example, to free up some more space on the devices. But I really think for most people out there, you're gonna have no issues with running out of space, considering that we are getting so much here. Now, neither of these two phones have wireless charging, which is a bit disappointing, but also something that I don't really expect to find with phones in this particular segment. And then both phones do feature in-display fingerprint sensors that work really well. You can see very fast there in the Bold N3. Try that one more time. And then we'll give it a try here in the Bold N2. There we go, very quick. We'll try that again. There we go, and I do think it's a little bit faster in the Bold N3, but overall not a huge difference. And most importantly, I think that's a really impressive feature to even find on a very affordable smartphone, having that in-display fingerprint sensor, so that is very impressive. And also in addition to that, both phones do feature face unlock, so I do appreciate that we have multiple methods here for accessing the phones. Now, taking a look at the camera modules on the back of the two devices, as you can see, there are some pretty big differences here when it comes to designs, but also in addition to that, we have different camera abilities. So with the Bold N3, we have a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. And then with the Bold N2, we're getting a quad camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. So really the biggest difference here is that one, we're getting different megapixel counts, but also we're not getting a depth sensing camera with the Bold N3. However, both phones do feature portrait mode for the back cameras, so with the Bold N3 they pretty much found a way to give us portrait mode without having that dedicated depth sensing camera. So really you're not losing out on any features, despite there being one less camera here with this device. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. This is the main rear camera right now on both phones. So this is how things look with the main rear camera. Also keep in mind that if you go over to the More tab, you can actually capture images in the full megapixel count. So actually for the Bold N3 it's located on this bottom slider, but you can see that you can take photos in that full 50 megapixels. And then what's kind of unique with the Bold N2 is that even though it is a 64 megapixel camera, you can actually capture images in 128 megapixels. So basically it multiplies things by 2. Keep in mind though that if you're capturing images in this higher megapixel mode, it is going to take slightly longer for it to process, and in addition to that, it is going to take up a lot more space on your device. Then from here we can head over to the ultra wide angle cameras in both phones. So you can see by switching over to that mode, we're able to fit a lot more content into a single frame here. I'm a big fan of ultra wide cameras, and especially when I'm traveling, that comes in handy quite a bit. And then with both devices, we can go over to the More tab, and from there we can access the macro cameras. And then with the macro cameras, you can get very close up here and take photos in great detail. There we go. So I now did that on both phones here. And then we can also go over to portrait mode to get those nice blurred out backgrounds that I know a lot of people are a big fan of. We can even adjust the blur as well, which is nice. And then flipping around to the front facing cameras in both phones, you can take portrait selfies. And then of course you can also take standard selfies as well if you don't want that blur effect. Now video recording with both devices maxes out at 1080p for the front facing cameras. However, with the rear cameras, with the Bold N2, you can take video at up to 2K quality, whereas you get 4K video recording here with the Bold N3. Now internally here with both phones, we are getting 8GB of RAM. However, the processors are different. So with the Bold N3, we're getting the MediaTek Dimensity 7050 processor, whereas with the Bold N2, we're getting the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. And then both of these phones are compatible with 5G connectivity, so keep that in mind. I do think at this point in 2023, you can get by with just 4G LTE, but having 5G compatibility is always a nice bonus. And then if you're curious how the two phones differ when it comes to actual performance from those processors, I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 6, and here are the scores that I got. So in the Bold N3, I got a single core score of 970 compared to a score of 771 with the Bold N2. And then you can see the multi-core scores are a lot higher with the Bold N3 compared to the Bold N2. So overall, I would say that both phones do actually perform very well. However, without a doubt, the Bold N3 is the faster phone of the two. Another difference with these two devices are the battery sizes, and then also how fast those batteries can recharge. So with the Bold N3, we're getting a 4,700 milliamp hour internal battery, and then we're getting 66 watt fast charging, which is really fast. And then with the Bold N2, we're getting a slightly smaller battery at 4,200 milliamp hours, and then it does max out at 30 watt fast charging. So it's definitely a great thing that we're getting such large batteries here with both phones, but then also being able to recharge those batteries very rapidly is excellent too. And another difference with these two devices is NFC. So with the Bold N3, we do have NFC, whereas there is no NFC with the Bold N2. And NFC is what's used for tap and pay. So if you want to use Google Pay, for example, to use your phone to pay for something, you can only do that here with the Bold N3, and you can't with the Bold N2. Another thing that's a bit disappointing for the Bold N2 is that this phone has not gotten a new version of Android since it was shipped with Android 11. So at this point, we're on Android 13, almost soon to be Android 14, and the Bold N2 is still at Android 11 with no signs of it ever getting updated to a newer version of the software. And then with the Bold N3, we are getting Android 13, but considering that the Bold N2 was never updated to anything newer than Android 11, I have a feeling the Bold N3 is going to have Android 13 forever. So that might not matter too much for most people, but just know what you're getting into here and don't expect any major Android software updates. But taking a closer look at the hardware of these two devices, I already talked quite a bit about the front panels here in both phones. These phones both have excellent looking displays and they seriously look so good, especially for a lower end smartphone, but even compared to some of the more expensive phones out there, these displays still look great. But beyond that, the materials these phones are made out of are both plastic. However, they are very different in appearance and feel. So with the Bold N3, we're getting this really sleek look. We're also getting this very large camera module here in the back, this big circle basically that houses all the various cameras. And then this material in the back is kind of a frosted finish, and it looks kind of wavy based on the direction that you're looking at the phone. Whereas with the Bold N2, we're kind of getting this like fake leather look to it, which certainly is not bad. I really like how it doesn't pick up any fingerprints, but definitely pretty much the opposite from the Bold N3 as far as appearance goes. And then with the Bold N2, we're certainly getting a way smaller camera module, but it is a bit more compact as well. So personally, I think the Bold N3 looks a lot cooler than the Bold N2, but it really comes down to personal opinion. Now on the left side of both phones, we have nothing here. Then on the right side, we have volume up, volume down, and the power button. Then up top here, we have the noise canceling microphones. And then on the bottom of the two phones, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. We have the microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and the speaker. And then, as I mentioned on the back, we just have the camera modules. So in conclusion, which of these two phones is the better choice? Well, without a doubt, the Bold N3 is better than the Bold N2 in every aspect, so in that regard, I would definitely go for this phone over the Bold N2, but it really comes down to pricing and the fact that you can buy the Bold N2 for a lot less than the Bold N3. And when it comes to that, you really have to think about whether or not the various upgrades that we're getting here are worth paying that extra price, and if you're even going to be using a lot of those upgraded features. So I'm definitely curious to know what you think. Let me know in the comments section below. But this is Kevin here with the Bold N3 versus Bold N2, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and have a great rest of your day.